Hello and welcome back to Pharmacist Diaries, the podcast that reveals the secret lives of pharmacists, from where their journeys began, where they are now, and everything in between. I am your host, Anisha Patel, and on today's episode, I'm super excited to introduce Ofran Al-Mossawi to the podcast. This conversation is epic, and you guys are gonna love it. If you have an interest in research, or maybe you've thought about it in the past, but you haven't done anything about it, or you don't really know where to start, then this is the episode for you. Ofran is a research guru and is currently completing a fellowship with the National Institute of Health and Care Research. This episode focuses solely on helping you guys to navigate the world of pharmacy research and encourage you to get involved. I asked Ofran a whole host of questions. Everything that starts from what is NIHR and how they provide a service to pharmacists. If you're interested in applying for a fellowship, how you go about doing that, what to do to make the most out of your application, or even stepping back to the beginning of your career and identifying what steps you need to take from the early stages as a newly qualified pharmacist all the way to the point where you're ready to step into a fellowship. She gives you ideas, she gives you feedback, she talks about the pros and cons of doing research with NIHR, and she truly helps us to navigate what steps we need to take to get involved. I love this episode because there is so much good content and information that you can take away and apply to your day-to-day role. Overall, this episode is inspirational, motivational, and educational. I hope you guys love it. Pharmacist Diaries, first of all, and thanks for coming onto the podcast today to talk about your career.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll start with why you became a pharmacist in the first place.
Oh, yes. It wasn't planned. It happened. I was a little bit disorganized when I was doing my A-levels, and I was not sure what I wanted to do afterwards. And my father I knew I wanted to be in a lab, and I knew I wanted to do a sciencey topic. And I knew I wanted to do something healthcare related. And at the time, my father suggested pharmacy, and that's what I applied for and got it.
I was in a similar situation. I think there's quite a few of us actually who've kind of fallen in the path. Even Steve mentioned that he kind of fell into pharmacy when he was an A-level student. Kind of, it just married up with a lot of the things that he liked, and he thought, well, why not? My parents they're not pharmacists, but they owned a community pharmacy for 25 years. So my dad was like, it's a brilliant profession for women. You can enjoy motherhood when you get married. You can locum, you can do hospital, you can do community. There's a lot of variety, and I think that you would really enjoy it, and you can chop and change. So he had recommended that I go down that pathway.
Oh. I don't think I thought that far ahead. I went to visit. I remember an open day visit with King's. And the first thing they took us through were the labs, and the smell of the labs just got me. And I thought, oh, yes, that's where I'm going to be.
That's amazing, though. You knew from very early on, and that's actually quite a unique sort of experience, because a lot of pharmacy students now, or even, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people who were trying to get into medicine were unfortunate or knew they'd have to kind of wait another year to try again because it was so competitive, and then sort of fell into pharmacy and then discovered their path throughout kind of university. So it's good you had some idea from the beginning.
Yes.
And you're still with us today.
I am.
Yeah. So what was it like for you in university in terms of like your passions and where you could see yourself? So you obviously liked the lab environment. Were you expecting that you would continue that journey?
Yeah, I thought I was going to finish university and go straight into a PhD. And I actually did that. As in, I knew I was going to do my pre-reg, because doing the pre-reg will just give you, it just ticks off a completion box. There's no point in doing 3 years and then just let it hang. So I did the pre-reg year. And when I finished, I while I was waiting I got offered 3 PhDs and I picked one of them. So while I was waiting for that to happen, I started working as a junior pharmacist. And then when they told me to come and do the PhD, I just dropped everything, handed in my resignation and walked off to do it. And then a week later, the funding fell through. So, and because I had refused to do any other topic except for the one that I wanted, so I just said, no, I'm not picking another one. I'll just go back to working and then wait and see what happens. And that took another 15 to 20 years.
Really? Oh my goodness.
I just refused to do any other topic until I wanted to do protein engineering.
And what is it about protein engineering that you are so interested in to wait that long?
I really liked it. I didn't do protein engineering in the end. So as you know, I just had to waited that long and gave up in the end. It's when I was doing my final year, I did receptor pharmacology and medicinal chemistry, and I absolutely loved those 2 topics. And one of the things I used to do instead of revising for my exams would sit down and try to predict how a protein would fold on a piece of paper and go back to my lecturer and say, what do you think of this? And he used to say, we have computers that do that. You need to focus on revision.
Get the basics.
So in the end, he had a project that was protein engineering. And when he said, here's a project, protein engineering, I said, absolutely yes. So dropped everything to go and do it, but the funding fell through. So,
oh, what a shame.
Yeah, that was depressing. And then I didn't really I just went into clinical pharmacy, and it's, life engulfs you. And in the end, I did a master's afterwards anyway. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess, your clinical journey and how it led to doing you've done 2 master's degrees, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your clinical journey and then how that marries up with the master's degrees that you have.
So I did, I went mostly into intensive care because the reason I liked it is I thought it was more closer to the pharmacology that we studied. You get more into what drugs you're infusing, what they're doing to your receptors and what's happening. And I liked that. I liked the molecular level of things. But as you know, working in hospital, that's probably a tiny fraction of your daily job. And I did intensive care. I did clinical trials. I found that really fascinating, and getting to know new things. And yeah, I got into teaching as well. So I was teaching postgraduate diploma when I was a pharmacist in York. And eventually I thought it's time for me to do a master's. And I looked around and I found that, and by then I was in pediatrics, pediatric intensive care, and I found that King's were doing a master's. It's a new master's, and it was advanced pediatrics. So I started, applied, got it, and I started doing that. And one of the things I liked about that master's degree is that it had a double module of research. Because before doing the master's, I was supervising master's students to do their projects. And I was sort of being amateur research guru, but and also amateur statistician, trying to help them out with it, all self-taught. But when I got into doing the first master's, it really, the research module really, I really enjoyed it. And I thought that's where I need to be, from engineering proteins to engineering numbers, maybe.
I guess I'll take you back a bit.
Yeah.
How did you fall into pediatrics? Because I guess if you wanted to do an MSc in advanced pediatrics, you will have floated through a children's ward on a rotation?
Oh, no. I was doing pediatric intensive care at the time. So I was doing adult intensive care to start with. And then at some point, one of the jobs that I did said you have to be lead pharmacist for intensive care. So that was adult and pediatrics.
I see.
And I focused mostly on the pediatric intensive care. And I thought I actually enjoyed pediatrics a lot more than adults.
What is it about pediatrics that you enjoy so much?
It's the constantly fluctuating environment. Nothing is predictable. Everything is down to science. No evidence. So you had to pull out your own evidence and find it. It's nicer working with nicer working with little people, I think. It's although it was intensive care, so you don't really interact with them as such. But you have this, I don't know, probably it's just a human innate thing that you want to do the best for them and protect them. Not that you don't want to do it for adults. I don't know, something about children that makes you even more want to, do even more for them. And that was, so that's when I decided to do a master's in advanced pediatrics. And that master's was really good, actually. It's one of the best things I did. And the lecturers were really inspiring. They're the ones, one of them who led the research module. He's at King's, actually, Shane Tibby.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the one that made me think even more about doing research. I knew I wanted to do it, but more into formally getting into it. So when I wanted to do research, I found that my stumbling block was that I'm not great at statistics, and to find a statistician was really hard. So I went and got a master's in medical statistics to fill that gap.
Yeah. It's quite hard sometimes, or daunting for the younger generation to go into research. You do your diploma, which involves it involves doing audits, and you kind of start thinking about research in a more in-depth way compared to your training year or what you do at university.
Yeah.
So you're kind of gathering those building blocks. But once you complete your diploma and you go into a specialist area, unless you're going down the advanced pharmacy framework with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, a lot of the things that you get involved with will be out of, fun or enjoyment, or what maybe the department needs are.
Yeah.
But it's not, I guess, a structured way. Like you said, it's quite self-directed. So sometimes actually completing a master's degree allows you to kind of get like a proper foundation.
Yeah.
And get the educational side of, developing research. So those are the real kind of like foundation blocks that you build in order to get to the next step,
That's
which
true.
is quite nice.
Yes. And the thing is, I knew that the reason I went for the first master's degree is because I knew I was doing a PhD. And because my degree was so long ago, I knew I had to get a master's. Because I went to, I was doing the prescribing course at King's, and I saw some of my old lecturers from King's, and oddly enough, they recognized me. So and one of them in particular I spoke to, and I said, I'm back here to do the prescribing course, but I'm thinking of doing a PhD now. And he said, do the master's first, do a master's first. And so I knew I was doing the master's for a reason, but I didn't want to do just any old master's. I wanted something that I wanted to enjoy. So I waited until something came up that I actually wanted to do, which was the pediatrics one.
Yeah, and not only just enjoyment, I guess, is that you can utilize a lot of that knowledge and skill in your workplace.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean by enjoying it, is it actually fits in with what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes, we're seeing a lot more that our junior pharmacists and our band 7s in general, a lot of people are going through the prescribing course, but then they're unable to utilize it on a day-to-day basis. So it is nice to be part of, a course and then see how you put that into practice in real life, which is great.
In a way, I was already doing that, but before I even did the master's, because I was supervising master's projects, and I thought that should have come after I've done. But I again, as I said, I didn't want to just do a master's for the sake of doing it. I wanted it to be something that I'll be interested in, relevant to what I was doing, and then that would bring the enjoyment factor to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what led you to your second master's then?
Well, it's because I finished, I really liked the double research module in the first master's. Then when I wanted to go and do my own research, I realized statisticians are so rare. They're like gold dust. And if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it for me. So I went and retrained as a statistician.
Amazing. How long is that master's? 1 year?
It's 1 year, but I was working full time at the time. So I did it over 2 years. And it was hard because I ended up losing a lot of my annual leave, went part time. but I was so determined to get it. And I must say, it was one of the most enjoyable masters I have ever done.
And why is that?
I didn't know how much I love statistics.
Well, that's amazing.
Well, it's maths. It's the whole numbers. Numbers are really lovely.
And you found something that you're really passionate about, and it's a super unique area, which, like you said, that it's like gold dust.
Yeah, at the time they were gold dust. I'm not sure. No, but as in when I wanted one, I couldn't find one. I suppose my projects were a little tiny. Here's a data set of 50 people I collected. Can you help me? And they had, big statisticians had massive projects on, and here's me not wasting, but, trying to get in there with my little data set. And I thought, well, for these little things, we need someone who's in-house, and I became the in-house. And hopefully, but then that led me on to bigger things.
And I guess from a funding point of view and from the hospital's perspective, was it challenging to get funded for both those master's degrees? Because I can imagine that working in different departments, it can be quite tough to convince the education and training team to support them. Not always, but I think resources and money is becoming quite tight now, and we have to really see the advantage of putting you into the course.
Yeah.
Tell me, how was that for you?
Well, the first one, the funding wasn't very hard in terms of funding, because my department had already, or our hospital had an arrangement with King's for a number of master's degrees, I think. And I was lucky to get in there just before the arrangement ends, and there was 1 or 2 spaces left. So that was just luck, to be honest. Otherwise, the funding would have been hard, and I would have probably have to have funded it myself. But in terms of the time dedicated to it, I lost all my annual leave nearly. And I did get study leave, of course. My department were really, really kind and really understanding and supportive, but there's only so much annual leave they can give you when you do it. Study leave they can give you. So I used up nearly all my annual leave in these 2 years. I think I had 12 days over the 2 years to take.
That must have been exhausting.
It was fine.
When you find something that you love, and when you do something that you truly enjoy, like this podcast, it's a good example. Yeah. I'm doing this outside of full-time working, and I'm a parent of 2 kids, one of which is still a baby, under the age of 1. And I think people always ask me, like, how do you find time to do it? And are you like staying up till 2, 3 in the morning? No, I'm actually in bed every day at 9 o'clock. That's my routine. Because you never know when a baby's going to wake up in the night. Yesterday, unfortunately, he was up from 2 till 4 a.m., which was very frustrating when I knew I had this today. But it's part and parcel of being a mum, and part and parcel of really, juggling lots. Oh, thanks.
How do you do it?
So, it's all about perspective, really, and putting things, prioritizing things that you're really passionate about. And I'm a huge advocate for that now, because I found something that I genuinely love. The creativity that comes with this, the innovation, it's mine. Like, I'm taking control of something myself. All the ideas come from me. And no one's got control over how I run it and what I do and who I interview. Like, it's just... I don't know. It's just me, and that makes me really happy. That kind of creative freedom makes me really happy, and I'm starting to I'm gaining a lot of skills that I didn't have, and then putting them forward for ideas in my day job, which is also really exciting.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it's a good little hobby.
It is.
I call it a passion project.
Passion project.
Yeah. So I guess when you completed both of your MSCs, you were then kind of ready to say, hey, I'm going for the PhD, or were you still waiting for a topic that would...
No, I actually started applying for the PhD 1 year into the first MSc.
Okay.
Because I knew it was going to be a long process, because I thought I'd go down the route of the fellowship rather than a stipended PhD, for a number of reasons. Well, my husband is amazing. He put up with so many years of me doing so much, going part-time and not really actually showing anything for the part-time, because I was working on the MSCs. But within the first year of the first MSc, I started to prepare the groundwork for an IHR application because I knew I was heading that way. I mean, the whole reason why I started the MSc is because it was my bridge over to a PhD. So I knew where the gaps were in terms of my NIHR application, where I was deficient and where I wasn't, because I spent nearly 2.5 years looking at what to do. And I actually submitted one application for a project at the time. And I got to interview stage, but I didn't get it. But so I parked that project and finished my second master's, and then immediately started on a new project. That all these projects also come from practice, from your daily clinical practice. So the first project was something that I did with one of the clinicians at St Mary's, worked with him on it. So he had the data set, he had an idea, and I worked with him on the idea, and then we changed it to something slightly different. And I did it as a master's project. But from that, every time you do a project, you end up with 10 more questions. And that led to this massive question that I had, which I developed into a proposal for the NIHR. And that went through the first time.
Amazing. Let's, I guess, strip this whole application process down. So first of all, because we have students listening in, we have newly qualified pharmacists, trainee pharmacists, all the way to very experienced pharmacists. But, who are NIHR?
Oh, the National Institutes of Health Research. So they're now the National Institutes of Health and Care Research.
And what is I guess, give us a little bit of detail about what the fellowship involves and what the application process is like.
Yeah, so they're the biggest funders of health research, and the advantage of working with the NIHR is that they actually care about your career. They don't sort of just say, here's a person that wants a bit of funding to do a course. It's not like that. They look at people in terms of what's their long-term trajectory. Are they in it for the long run? Is this what they want? And it shows that they have such skilled people that, you could write whatever you write in the application form, and they can actually really pick on those things and decipher them. So the application is incredibly competitive, but if you know what you want and you have really robust background, because if that was your interest in the first place, you would have probably started from the beginning in doing certain things that would get you to that goal. And by the time you come to apply to the NIHR, you have done a number of things, like you've been involved in some projects, you've done some publications, you have dedicated some of your own time at least to research. And by the time you get to the NIHR, you've done these things and you're ready as a person and in a career stage to take that commitment where they invest in you to do that project. And it's a huge responsibility. You can't just go there and say, please give me 300,000 so I can do this project because it's fun. It's more of a, I want to do this for a number of reasons. Sorry. I want to do this for the one thing they judge you on, or they, not judge you, I suppose. The 5 things actually they assess you on. So it's the project, because it's a personal fellowship. They assess the project. So is it beneficial for the NHS and patients? They assess you as a person to say, are you dedicated enough, and where is your career going, and is this the path you're carving out for yourself? And so therefore you're worth investing into as a person. The research environment that you're in, have you placed yourself in an environment where it facilitates this project that you want to and the career that you're going to head towards? And they look at the project itself. The supervisors. Are they going to be supportive enough? Can't remember what the 5th one is.
If it comes back to you, you can let me know.
Yeah, so the assessment is quite rigorous, but it's nice if you know what you want and you've worked towards that goal, it's successful. It's not you think back, you think, okay, yeah, that was fine. But the first application I did, I suppose I wasn't as ready as I thought, even though I knew always that this is where I'm heading. The usefulness of the first rejection in that it highlighted where my deficiencies were. So I knew where to focus and address them. And that, even though at the time I thought, oh gosh, that's terrible, they rejected me. But thinking back and looking back, I think they actually really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, no, and it's good that you have, I guess, you utilize that rejection to understand more about where your barriers are, or what you need to learn, or what processes you need to, or steps you need to take to improve in order to get awarded the next time. And it's good that you did, you fought your way to trying again, that you were determined. It's clear
you
from
can't just stop if you want it.
Yeah,
that where you're heading, you can't just stop. And also, if you speak to anyone who's part of this, any fellowship, not just NIHR, but say the Wellcome Trust or MRC or anyone, you speak to any of those people, they'll give you a long list of rejections and what they've learned from them. Because if you're going to succeed, you will have rejections, and then you move on from them without wallowing in them, I suppose.
Did you feel quite defeated because it takes such a long time to do the application? How long does it take on average to get an application done?
I'd say for a really good application, you can't just suddenly decide, oh, let me put in an application. The thing opens up for 3 months, but developing the idea and why you want to do this and how it all started probably starts a year ahead. So I worked on each application for a year, probably. And by the time you submit it, it's a massive document, about 75 pages long. So it's not a little thing. But the second application I remember was so much easier. As in, I don't remember it taking that much out of me, because I was constantly doing it for over a period of a year, because it was brewing in my head always. This is the project, this is the idea. And I found myself, even when I was commuting to work, I'd have an idea and I'd sit down and type a paragraph on my phone because I thought, oh, I like this idea. And so by the time when it came to putting it together, the background had already been developed. The sort of the general idea was developed. Everything was put together in a way in a draft format, because I've been thinking about it and just living it for a long time.
Yeah.
But also the biggest factor is that the supervisors that I had picked were just world class. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would. They were so good in making me think about how to make it more, how to bring my ideas across more clearly, in a much clearer way. In particular, my primary supervisor.
How do you how do you find the right supervisor? Because it's a long process doing the application. Yeah. And obviously you want someone who's going to be supportive and really mentor you, and someone who's very experienced who can actually help you with the application process as well. Have you got any advice in terms of knowing who to turn to?
It depends on what topic you've chosen. So my topic was in pediatric intensive care, but it had a huge statistical element to it. So I was doing something that's very data sciencey, very statistically, but applied to a real world setting in a question that was just born out of my practice. So my clinical supervisor was the same supervisor that I used for the first project, because it's a continuation of that project, and he's an expert in his field when it comes to pediatric intensive care. So my primary supervisor, she was one of my lecturers at when I did my MSc in stats, and she's one of the world's top statisticians, and she's incredible. So she's probably between her and Sai, so they're the two main ones. In fact, there are three main supervisors. And my third supervisor is also a professor of statistics, but she is a national expert in data linkage. So she's also incredible. And I knew what elements of my project were needed what sort of expertise, and those are the people I went out and got. So I knew I was doing data linkage. I knew it was in pediatric intensive care. And my fourth supervisor, who is also a epidemiologist, a professor of epidemiology in pediatric intensive, and he looks after the pediatric intensive care project. So he's an expert in that field as well. So the elements of my project determined who I go for. And of course, my final supervisor had lots. The fifth one, he's a really prominent professor in pharmacy, but he's done a research career. And so he knows administrative data really well. He's worked on massive projects that are not just in the UK, but international. So he was my professional sort of inspiration.
You've got a big support network.
They are amazing in that they just gave their time selflessly, and I'm so lucky. But that's what you find if you have enough drive, I suppose. You also rely on the amazing kindness of people.
I mean, to do what you're doing, it's inspirational because it takes a lot of dedication and time and energy, and there are lots of sort of obstacles along the way, and it's a big learning experience. But what have been the main sort of advantages of doing this? Like what is it that you like have achieved from it that you're thinking like, this is just life-changing and I'm so glad that I've gone down this pathway?
So before I started this, every time I wanted to do anything to do with research, it was always my own time. As in, if you really wanted to get stuck in and do something that's quite a sizable piece of work, I'd go and spend weekends, spend evenings, get the data, say, for example, for my current practice, but I'd really have to use my own time. And it was this competing interest between your clinical commitments and doing research. And I don't think in pharmacy we are set up very well to incorporate research as part of our daily practice, which is a shame, really, because I think my undergrad training, they trained us as primary principal investigators, and yet we come out and we don't apply any of that in our daily practice. And it's difficult to put it in and the time in if you really wanted to focus on research. And when you try to focus on research, you feel a bit guilty because you neglected not neglected, but it's competing with your clinical duties. So this gives you the time and the focus to really become an expert in some particular field that you're interested in, because you put the project together, you selected your supervisors, you have gone in front of the NIHR or MRC, or welcome, whoever they are, and presented your case and got the funding. So you've got this weight of this responsibility of funding on you to say, I better prove that I'm worth it. So yeah, it's nice. It's your own project. You own it. You focus on your research without feeling the guilt of, everyone else is picking up my wards for me today.
Yeah, no, it's really hard to do both at the same time. Like when you're in a clinical job, when you're working in the NHS, when you're a ward pharmacist, whether you're seeing patients in clinic, whether you're working in the dispensary, a lot of your time is focused on the patient. You also have
and
other
admin
commitments
as well.
Yeah,
lots
lot of admin. You're doing education and training. You're potentially going to be a trainee pharmacist or diploma tutor. You've got people that you're managing on a day-to-day basis in terms of junior pharmacists. You've got finance to think about, guidelines to write, formulary applications to
all
do.
of that, exactly.
It is full on. So to find, and this is, I've been trying to, I work in education and training in Evelina. So part of my job as the academic link pharmacist is to look at this and incorporate, for example, the advanced pharmacy framework into our day-to-day routine for our juniors to work on towards stepping from a band 7 to a band 8A.
Yeah.
And we've also looked at how we can encourage our juniors to get involved with more research, maybe get some posters out there, especially with MPPG. Great opportunity to get involved as a stepping stone and just see whether or not that you like it. But I have found that people, like if you look at the entire department, there aren't that many pharmacists who are really interested in it. And I find it quite strange. Like you said,
you're right.
You do a lot of it in university. You know, your focus as well for your 4th year, for the first 2 terms, is on this massive dissertation project. And then you go into the workplace and you're so focused on the clinical day-to-day admin leadership roles that it always gets it's always getting sidelined. And it needs to be not the other way around.
That disconnect threw me when I first qualified.
Yeah, it needs to be equal.
Yes.
We need to transition towards improving how much research. And like you said, pharmacists are so well placed to do the research on medicines to improve outcomes for patients. Like, we're in an amazing position. And in pediatrics, I think there's a lot going on. I absolutely love everything that's going on in pediatrics. And
huge gaps everywhere in peds.
But there are huge gaps that we can fill. I think for some people, they do find it quite a long process in terms of the time, and it seems like you just have to do so much work to get there.
But you don't always have to get to the PhD level, the multiple MSCs or whatever. That's just something I enjoy. It's because I know if I stop, my brain will die. And I actually really enjoy doing it and putting it back and seeing, this whole clinical research connect is just really interesting. But also, just to mention, and you said that the lack of research sort of embedded into pharmacy. It's if you are going to practice, every job description, if you read every pharmacist job description, it would say put current research into practice or practice evidence-based medicine. Or that's something that you've got to do. It's if you don't do that, then you're not really doing your job right. And if you can't derive your evidence from the literature because you haven't got the skill, or if we haven't got the skill, then we're not doing our jobs. So we cannot be not interested in research, because if you're not interested in research, then you're not interested in evidence-based medicine, then we're not interested in doing the best for our patients.
I like that concept. I like the way that you've thought about it. It makes sense.
It doesn't work if you're not interested.
Yeah.
So I've always said that, because I used to run critical appraisal sessions, and I said, you don't need to be a statistician, a researcher, an epidemiologist. You don't need to be any of those. But you need to have enough skills that when you read a new piece of research, you know how to extract the correct information out of it. And if you don't know how to do that, there's no way you can do the best for your patients.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, since starting at the Evelina 4 years ago, I had kind of in my mind, I said to myself, try and get one publication or audit or poster a year at least, as a minimum. Try and do that, because it is really challenging to find the time, but there are gaps in practice, like you said. And now I've started specializing in palliative care. It's been eye-opening, because now I'm responsible for that cohort of patients within the Evelina from the pharmacy's perspective, and I really want to get involved. There is such little evidence in that area. So I've joined, the pediatric palliative medicine group, and I'm working alongside our consultants, and on a national scale, people are getting involved in research, and I'm just sort of tapping into that network and then hopping on to a bit of kind of research that's going on. And that's a really good stepping stone to get started, because it can be overwhelming to get to the point where you want to do a PhD. or get enough research to work towards maybe a consultant pharmacist, position if that's the pathway that people want to go down. But I think incorporating it into your job so that you can use that evidence in day-to-day practice or do the research, and whatever the outcome is, you can create a guideline for your hospital. Like, as long as it kind of impacts your area, it makes it a little bit easier to find the motivation and the determination to actually get it done.
I mean, especially working in pediatrics, how many times do you get submissions to drugs and therapeutics wanting to use something that's quite novel, and then you need to sit down and decide based on the evidence provided that, the benefit versus risk. How did you decide that? And how did we decide that? And I think we need to reevaluate probably how we practice. Maybe it starts from undergraduate level, that don't expect to go out there and not do any research, because at least understand enough of research skills so that you can look at other people's research and understand it, not necessarily doing it to a level. It's not everyone's sort of passion, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I believe you're coming to the end of your PhD now, are you?
I'm just rewriting I've written the thesis, but as you know, the first draft is always a bit rubbish. Or I feel it's more rubbish than anyone else's. So I'm just going over it again to de-rubbishify it.
Nice way of putting it. How many years has it taken you so far?
It's supposed to take 3 years, and I used national data sets. So I used hospital episode statistics and the PicNet data set, and I got them linked to create a longer data set. And I thought, because my PhD started and 6 months later we had lockdown, so I spent most of my PhD not really interacting, but doing it remotely. The problem is that I thought, with my PhD having just large data element to it, it doesn't matter. They're just going to give me the data and I'll carry on working. But most data providers had a backlog because they were prioritizing COVID-related projects, so they stopped. So I ended up with about a 14-month delay. So I ended up with a 9-month extension because the NIHR were great in granting the extension. And I've managed to finish everything within the time period. It's just that the first draft wasn't great to submit, so I'm just rewording it to submit it, hopefully in the next month or two.
And when do you expect to be done with this part of your career journey in terms of the PhD? When do you do your final submission?
In a month or two, hopefully.
Oh, in a month or two. Yeah, that's it. Then,
that's it.
And then you've got your Viva afterwards.
Yes.
And what's your next adventure?
So, as I said, things always start as overlapping. So I've actually started 2 years ago thinking about post-PhD.
Oh my God, that's insane. Like it's normal, but you're constantly thinking like 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Oh yes, yeah. You have to. But if I suppose if that's what you like to do,
absolutely.
You always you're thinking the next step ahead in terms of what I need to do next. But if it was a one-off thing for you, just say, I can't wait to get rid of it and move on to something else. Whereas for me, I started 18 months into the PhD thinking about what's next and started to write the skeletons of a few more proposals for the postdoctoral grants and so on. I have now there's one particular niche idea that I'm already working on trying to put together. And most of what I'd like to do is use all the skills that I got in my PhD to try and figure out or develop a pipeline for pediatric medicines in terms of evidence too. And we're in a good position at Goshen that we have a lot of data, so we could really squeeze the life out of that data and get the maximum out of it.
Oh, that's amazing. I guess we've already been talking an hour. You might not have realised already.
Has it really? Oh,
yeah.
wow. Have I turned into Steve?
No, you haven't turned into Steve. Steve, I could definitely...
I better tell him.
Done an extra 2 hours with Steve. No, I guess... to close off the podcast and you're really inspiring in terms of all the research you've done. And that's true dedication. And I love how determined that you've been step by step, you know what you've wanted to do. And it's always nice to meet someone who has that passion. So yeah, good for you. My question is that if you were to speak to students or to junior pharmacists, I guess what advice would you give them if they were sort of at the point where they are considering research as part of their career journey, they really want to get into it? Where would you kind of advise them to start?
Well, definitely start with smaller projects, teaming up with other people who are doing research. So do the data collection for them, maybe, and get involved and get stuck into thinking about the analysis, thinking about how it's written. Write a paper. Try to publish. It all starts from small projects, because you're not going to just suddenly jump and do a, multi-center study or whatever. Speak to people who've been down that path and maybe latch onto them for a bit and see if you like the way their way. Maybe shadow them. Have a mentor that is doing that sort of work and see where they can get you, as in what type of work do they do on a daily basis and what their job's like, and is this something of interest to you? And anyone who's a new graduate is no stranger to research anyway, so they know what it's like. Maybe between graduating and suddenly 5 years down the line, we forget what it was like, and then suddenly we're scared of research. But if you think you want to make that, you definitely need to make some of it part of your career, because I said you need to practice evidence-based medicine. But if you need to, if you think you want to get more seriously stuck into it, say, make it the bulk of your job, I'd say, start with small projects, join other research teams. And the thing is, when you're working, you always think, I've found something, a question, and you try to go and search for evidence, and and then you find nothing. We've come across this so many times, all of us, where we have a question to say, does this work in such and such? And then we can't find the answer. There you go. There's your research question. Think about it. There's a research question every day. And if you're interested enough, you would follow that up with generating the evidence for it rather than waiting for someone to generate that evidence. But definitely join research groups, I would say. Do small projects and get mentors.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And really excited to see what comes from your work and your career in the future, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Good luck with your podcasts.
Thank you.